Janet Morana, Executive Director of Priests for Life, joined here by the National Director, Father Frank Pavone. In a moment, you are also going to see Kevin Burke of Rachel's Vineyard. Welcome to our seminar today on Abortion Recovery Awareness Month. This is our final 1-hour seminar, and we want to hear from you questions you might have. Now, before we begin today's topic, there was something that happened last week, very sad thing. And we just want to briefly talk about that. Vicki Thorne died suddenly, the founder of Project Rachel. I'm going to show a picture of our dear friend Vicki. Unfortunately, apparently, from what we've heard, she had a massive heart attack. She hadn't been ill. It was just a sudden thing. And she will be very missed. You might ask, well, Janet, Project Rachel, and then there's Dr. Teresa Burke founded Rachel's Vineyard. Yeah, they both tracks started running around the same time, because when these two women started reaching out to women hurt by abortion, there wasn't much happening. So Vicki's focus with Project Rachel was training clergy, priests, because what was happening is women would come to confess their sin of abortion, then they come back again and again. So Vicki had to train the priests how to deal with women who have been hurt by abortion to get them to the point with spiritual direction that they could forgive themselves. So Project Rachel now is under the auspices of the USCCB. And of course, we commend Vicki to the Lord and thank her for her decades of work in abortion recovery. So I wanted to have a little moment to pay tribute to Vicki Thorne. Well, now joining us, of course, is one of the co-founders of Rachel's Vineyard, Kevin Burke. Kevin, welcome to the program.
Thanks so much. Great to be with you today, Father Frank.
Great to have you. And of course, Father, today we're going to talk about the wider circle of victims of abortion. So why don't you frame our discussion? And brothers and sisters, we want to hear your questions too. As Father is giving you this introduction to our conversation today, we want to hear your questions and comments too.
Well, of course, Kevin and Janet, it's good to be with you both. Abortion Recovery Awareness Month. We've been giving a lot of attention to it this month, and as we should. And I've noticed a lot, our communications department has been inviting us to do a lot of media about this. Even on Newsmax, they were asking me about Abortion Recovery Awareness Month.
That's great.
Earlier in the month. So it's been getting some attention. People are learning more about, because if there's abortion recovery, what that means is that there's abortion wounds,
right?
And that's the whole thing, to tell people, A, there's damage that's done, B, you might be experiencing some of that damage, because a lot of times people are experiencing the damage and they don't realize that it's from the abortion,
right? They're not making the connection.
Yes, and then C, it's hey, healing is available. Nobody has to suffer this pain in silence or just, deal with it as if there's nothing that can be done. There's a lot that can be done. So we're making people aware of the different recovery programs. So today, in this seminar, we're going to be talking about the wider circle of victims. And let me frame it by going back to a slogan that the pro-abortion people always use. Abortion is a decision between a woman and her physician and sometimes they say, and her God, Right. Sometimes they'll throw in and her family. But the basic presumption that the other side wants everyone to make is that this is a decision that only impacts that mother. The baby, for them, they pretend the baby doesn't even exist. But then, Of course, if the baby doesn't exist, why do you need a procedure in order to kill the baby? But they don't mind. That lack of logic doesn't bother them. But they want people to think that this is an isolated decision with isolated consequences. This is why understanding the wider circle of victims is so important, because it blasts out of the water this idea that this is an isolated decision with isolated consequences. In reality, neither the decision nor the consequences are isolated. Now, unfortunately, it's usually not a decision. It's usually a giving way to pressure from various circumstances or people. But there are other people involved, and there are other people wounded. And that's what we're going to look at. The primary victim of abortion is always that baby. And we always, none of what we do in the abortion recovery movement or at Priests for Life or Silent No More or Rachel's Vineyard is meant to dismiss or take attention away from the baby. Sometimes people have that misunderstanding. They'll
Well,
see our
no,
signs.
Father, the baby is at the epicenter.
Of course,
Like we
yes.
say with shockwaves. So the baby's at the epicenter, and that shockwave reverberates out
There's a
to the
shockwave.
mother, to
Mother,
the father,
father.
to the grandparents, to future siblings,
Right.
to other relatives, the aunts and uncles that don't have a niece or nephew any longer, or the
That's right.
cousins don't have
That's
a
right.
cousin to play with. And then, of course, then there's the friends that might have told the person to have the abortion, help to
Right.
bring them there, help
Right.
pay for it. So it reverberates over all of society. Really.
That's right. And its major consequences. It's not just like, oh, I feel a little shaking from the tremors. No. It's like, buildings are falling on you.
Right.
I mean, abortion is, it's not, abortion never touches us gently. This is something that people have to understand. There's nothing gentle about it. It's devastating. And it wounds people way more deeply than we can even describe or imagine. So
Right.
that's what we want to talk about here. And the vision, the other slogan of the other side, of course, is that, it's a woman's issue. Nonsense. Okay, it's a man's issue. It's a society issue. It's a human rights issue.
It's a family issue.
Grandparents issue. It's a family issue. It's everybody's issue.
Right.
So these are some of the basic concepts that frame our discussion. And final point here, just for the framing, if the wounds are multifaceted and reaching wide circles of victims, then so is the healing.
Right.
The healing is relational. The healing is group healing. The healing involves many layers with many people involved. And by the way, when we say victims, we should also clarify something. When you say the wider circle of victims, when we say a victim, we don't mean that they have no responsibility necessarily.
Right.
What we mean is they are wounded. That's all we're saying. They are wounded. Now, you can be wounded simply by the action of somebody else, or you could be wounded by your own action too, or a combination of that.
Right.
It doesn't mean you're not responsible. There's guilt. There's plenty of guilt to go around. Sometimes the grandparents are more guilty than the mother. Sometimes the father is more guilty than the mother, right? And the abortionist is the most guilty of all. Okay,
Right.
So we're not told when we say victims, we're just simply pointing out people are wounded by abortion. Again, not gently, but devastatingly, and we need to be aware of those wounds so that we can offer some healing.
Right. Well, Kevin, with Rachel's Vineyard now, obviously women come to Rachel's Vineyard for healing, men have come, but the experience of your teams all over the country, all over the world has now expanded, hasn't it, into these other categories that Father's talking about, right?
Absolutely. And that's been very true from the beginning. As you were doing a nice job of kind of setting the framework for our discussion today, I was thinking of a retreat where I was serving as the team counselor. And every Rachel's Vineyard retreat, there is a site leader who facilitates the weekend program. There's a priest or a deacon or a minister if it's an interdenominational retreat. There are some folks who have experienced abortion and healing and have been called to serve in the team, but there's also a counselor. So I was a counselor serving in a retreat, and there sometimes when people want to learn more about Rachel's Vineyard and serve in some way in the ministry. In this example, it was a regional diocese was sending one of their counselors to the retreat so that they would be familiar with the process and be able to refer to it. So I kind of, agreed to kind of mentor this person through the weekend, be there for them, answer any questions, etc. They shared I said, is there any history of abortion or a family members experience abortion? Because when you go through the retreat to learn about it, you really enter the process. It's very important that you go and do all the activities and journey through it with the participants. So this particular counselor, we'll call her Mary, and Mary said, no, I don't really have any direct connection that I can think of. So she begins to listen to the stories as the retreat unfolds of the women and men present. They're telling their abortion stories. And on Saturday morning, after the abortion stories finished, she came up to me and the blood had kind of gone, had drained out of her face. And I could tell that she was a little bit upset. I said, what's going, she said, can we talk? So I went aside and talked to her. It turns out that she had completely forgotten that in college, she had driven a roommate to get an abortion. The friend told her about the abortion. She didn't say, go get the abortion. The person was set on it. She didn't ask her whether she should consider other options. She merely felt she was being supportive and drove her. And then she realized now at this point, after hearing the stories of these women and the impact of abortion, that, wow, I had a direct connection and relationship to that child that was lost. And it really touched her very deeply. And I think that's a good example of the fact that we have thousands, millions of people in our country who have had some relationship to abortion directly or indirectly. And we're not conscious of the fact that our association with that unjust death, that act of violence, it touches us. It touches
Right.
us very deeply. And it's surprising to people when they step away from their normal defenses that they have, or the ways that are in denial about that, and there's some awareness raised. It can be really profound and touch them very deeply. And she went on to have a really beautiful experience of the retreat, and she honored that child and named that child, and she prayed for the mother and father of that baby, that they would also come to repentance and healing.
Yeah. And that's very important, Kevin, because right now, listening, brothers and sisters, maybe you know someone who participated in this way. And that's why we're here, is to raise that awareness so that they can find help. And you can go to abortiontestimony.com, put in your zip code, you'll see where the nearest Rachel's Vineyard retreat is. Because, Father and Kevin, through Silent No More, I've heard a lot of different stories. So, for example, like Kevin, you gave one example. This girl drove her roommate, all right, for the abortion, thinking she was being helpful. Oh, I'm having an abortion tomorrow. Can you take me? And her friend must have said, oh, sure. Okay, I'll drive you. Well, what if she told her, no, I can't take you. You can't have an abortion. There's other choices or other options. But no, instead of her offering that advice, she just said, oh, okay, I'll help.
You know what I've advised people? Your friend asks you to drive her to the abortion clinic. If you're against that abortion, get in that car and drive her to the pregnancy center.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a life and death. It's a rescue.
And you can find out where the nearest pregnancy center is by going to Option Line, and they'll put your zip code in there. You'll see where the nearest pregnancy center is.
Hop in the car and drive her to the pregnancy
center. Take her to the pregnancy
center.
center. But, there's also been, Kevin and Father, cases I've heard where in a college dorm, I heard one case where this girl wanted to have an abortion. She didn't have the money, and she asked everyone on her dorm floor, would they help chip in for the abortion?
Talk about spreading the guilt.
Spreading the guilt. So every person that gave $10 or $20 towards that abortion, they contributed to the death of the baby.
Let's pause and think about that. I want to invite our viewers, by the way, anything we've said so far that you want to comment or ask about. I know some people have been leaving some comments, so I want to respond to some of those after I make this point. But, when we say this wider circle of victims, so you think about that. I gave $10. It might just be $10. Oh, the people were chipping into the friend's abortion. So I gave $10. At some point, if not immediately, I'm going to think about that. At some point, I'm going to see a picture of a baby in the womb at the time of pregnancy that my friend was at that moment. At some time, people may see, and this is what jars a lot of people to repentance and healing, a picture of an aborted baby. And then that $10 bill comes into my head. Wait a minute. I helped to make that happen.
Well,
and there's a tremendous, and you can't take it back. You can't reverse the clock.
Well, there's an example I can point out to both of you. Georgette Forney, who co-founded Silent No More with me, she's also president of Anglicans for Life.
Right.
So she has this donor that every August she sends a donation of $15 to Anglicans for Life annually on the same date. So out of curiosity, one day, Georgette contacted her just to say, well, thank you for your donation. I'm just wondering, every August you send us $15.
Same day, same amount.
Same amount, same day. And you know what she said? She said, because that's the day I gave my friend $15 for an abortion.
Yeah.
And I want to give back. I want to make up for that tragic mistake of what I did. So, and now this is 20 years later. She's still sending $15.
Yeah.
to give back for what she did, because she felt that she can. And this was before Silent No More. This was before Shockwaves. Before we announced any of this, this woman on her own said, "I contributed to the death of this baby. I have to give back."
Yeah. Wow.
And she's
Wow.
been
And
doing it for decades.
let me just point out to our viewers that that person would be very welcome on a Rachel's Vineyard retreat if they were looking for a deeper healing of that experience, or they wanted to honor that child and go through the retreat process. They would be most welcome.
Yeah, that's
Yes,
very,
absolutely.
very good
Well,
point.
because you know why? That will help give them that healing and closure. Like you said about the other woman, Kevin, they have an opportunity to memorialize that child, to name that child. You know, it's kind of helping to put the humanity back onto that baby, and at the same
Yes.
time get more healing for
And
themselves.
people who go through healing because of that, and it's a very deep wound. People might not think it's a deep participation in the procedure, but it's a deep wound. Just takes up 2 seconds for it to happen, right?
Right.
Hey, I'm gathering some money oh, here you go. 2 seconds for it to happen. It's a very deep wound. But people who go through the healing are also welcome to come on Silent No More and share their testimony.
And share their
right?
testimony, absolutely.
Yeah.
But that, there's another facet here too, guys, is that what about the person who's in a college dorm, and they hear of a girl down the hall is going for an abortion
Right.
this Saturday? Okay, you're scared. She's talking, oh yeah, I'm going to have an abortion on Saturday. And you say nothing. You've contributed to the death of that baby, right?
Because
Because
you could have said something.
You could have said something. You could have spoken up, right, Kevin? I mean,
Well,
didn't you
I had
then?
I unfortunately, very sadly, I had that experience myself. I can share some of that if you'd like.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. Now we're going way back. So, I was in my 20s. I never heard of Roe v. Wade at this point. I was in graduate school for social work, and I wouldn't describe myself as, I was definitely not pro-abortion, but I was not pro-life in any sense at the time either. And I was learning the tools of the counseling trade, which is there's a lot of, neutrality and objectivity, and you just listen, let people make their own decisions and things. So that was my kind of knowledge framework. And I had a close family member, someone I had known for years, and we were friends and family members, and she trusted me. Knew that I was in graduate school, knew that I had some religious sensibility, but at that time, my faith perspective was more like a social justice framework. So, it was like, rights for the poor and visiting prisoners and helping to feed the hungry, et cetera. But there was no connection to abortion at that point yet. So she comes to me and she shares about the situation, and I did know that there was assistance available for someone who was pregnant. So I said, look, I can give you some resources and that you can that will help you if you decide to parent the child, but I'll respect whatever decision you make. Now, of course, that response, which to our secular ears and maybe some of our listeners sounds like a very reasonable, compassionate, and kind response,
Right.
but in a sense, I was perhaps sealing the fate of her baby at that point.
Yeah, you were, Kevin, because in a way you were making it sound like, well, it's up to you. It's up to you. And we know from the voices of the women who've had abortions from Silent No More that sometimes they're just looking for an answer. They've lost hope. They don't know what to do. So unless you say and you give them the hope and say, like, well, you don't have to have an abortion. There's better choices. I'll help you.
Right.
By not saying that, you're pushing them
Well,
to the
in other words,
abortionist
they're already overwhelmed with the weight of this
decision.
quote decision.
Right.
And to say, well, it's up to you, simply reinforces their isolation.
Right.
Oh, it's up to you. In other words, it's not up to me to lead the way here, maybe to a better place, a better choice. No, it's up to you. Yeah, but you're already drowning under this
Right.
the weight of this. How can it be up to you?
So, we want to encourage anyone, if you participated in any way like we're describing here, to know that there's healing available for you too. And you can go to abortionforgiveness.com, put your zip code in, and see where the nearest Rachel's Vineyard. I'm curious, anyone listening so far, have you had this kind of an experience? Please let us know if you'd like to share with us. We can share with others too. Father, I think it says, thank you for praying for those.
For my wife, who's experiencing the evil attacks. Yes, Pierre, we are praying
Yes.
for you and for all of you, brothers and sisters who are watching.
And you know what? We can point right now, Father, to this beautiful statue
Yes.
that I have here. This is Jesus, and he's holding the baby, the aborted baby, and he's holding this woman's
Holding the hand,
of this woman who's obviously lost her baby to abortion. Entrusting her baby to Jesus. But look at Jesus. He's looking right at her, and his hand is on her hand, extending that mercy. And of course, yesterday we just had Divine Mercy Sunday, where anyone hurting from abortion should know that the Lord is here to forgive them and welcome them back, right, Father, to the church, right?
The Lord is at my side. It reminds me of that scripture, right? You know, he's not standing over her to judge. He's not condemning.
No.
You know, he's counseling. He's leading her to open up. You know,
Right.
the church says, open up, face honestly what happened, call it by its proper name. Don't sugarcoat it. But then know that the mercy of God isn't to be sugarcoated either.
Right.
It's fierce, it's big, it's intense.
And
it's
we've ministered to women who have multiple abortions. In fact, Father, you've
I always refer to the case, a woman I spoke to who had 26 abortions.
Right.
Yeah.
And she, if repenting, will be forgiven.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So let's go on, Kevin and Father, talk about some of the other circle of victims.
Well, let's see. Are there any other comments or questions we want to
see any
take a
questions?
look
We're
at?
checking.
I know our
Okay. We're waiting.
people are signing on.
We're waiting for more questions. Okay. Who
Yeah.
asks for?
Who asked for? Yeah. In other words, yeah, it's crazy, right?
I know.
Asking donations.
Very
for-
common.
It's all too common. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, believe it or not, that's sad, but yeah. Sometimes these girls are in desperate circumstances away at college. They're not with their family, and they think they have no choice but the abortion, and they ask their friends to help them pay for it. It's sad, but yeah, that's what happens. So let's move on for a minute to grandparents. Now, grandparents, grandparents are kind of like with the fathers. There's two sides of the coin.
Right.
There's those grandparents that took their daughter for the abortion who said, some of them very well-meaning, thinking they were helping their daughter.
Mm-hmm.
We have so many testimonies about those cases. You know, they thought, well, you know, she's only in high school. This is going to, quote, quote, ruin her life. I'll just bring her off for the abortion. Some parents forced their daughter for the abortion, told her, either you have that abortion, or I'm going to throw you out of the house.
This is perhaps the most misguided parental kindness and guidance that one could imagine.
Yeah,
it is. You
terrible.
are doing
such
damage to your to your daughter.
And with all the testimonies we have, I can in particular point out Teresa Bonapartis, who is also involved in abortion recovery. She's given her testimony. It's up on our website, and she herself talks about she was a teenager, pregnant, and her parents threw her literally out of the house because she refused to go have an abortion, and she had to go live with another relative, and eventually she gave birth to she eventually had the abortion because nobody would help her. They threw her out of the house and said, you're going to have this abortion or get out. And she was like 16, 17 years old, no place to go. And by the time she had her abortion, Father, it was a second trimester abortion because of all this time lag. She was begging to have her baby, and nobody would help her. And she ended up, they took her actually to a hospital up in Westchester County, and she had a late-term abortion. Yeah.
The fear, the despair, I mean, some of the same factors that drive the mother to abort drive the grandparents to push the abortion.
And that's what happened in
Fear,
this case.
despair,
lying. In her family's case, it was embarrassment. They didn't want anyone to know
pride,
that their daughter, got pregnant out of wedlock. And so they wanted to cover it up with abortion. That's what happens.
Yes.
But then there's the other grandparents who falls into my category, which I've given my testimony. One of my daughters was away at college out in Michigan. And, she was doing okay at the beginning of the school year. But by that spring, she was saying she was sick. She wasn't feeling good and all this. And she came home. She was a type 1 diabetic. So I was assuming it was her diabetes. And she came home. And it wasn't until almost a year later, I found out that she had an abortion without me knowing. didn't, come for help, didn't tell me. And she knew that I would have accepted the baby. I would have helped her. I wouldn't have, I would be supportive. We went through a healing program together, but I had asked her, I said, why? Why didn't you come to me? Why? And you know what she said? Well, Mom, I didn't want to disappoint you.
Right. They
And
don't want to
since
disappoint.
I don't want to disappoint you.
Very common.
It's
Yeah.
very common. And since I came out with my story, I've had other grandparents come to me and tell me the same thing happened to them. And this happens, Kevin, very common, I think, in the pro-life movement, is that because we're so enmeshed and we tell our kids, and our kids get raised in pro-life 101, they're just so enmeshed in this work that they say they don't want to disappoint their parents.
Yeah. Look at Connie's comment. My dad told me if I got pregnant, he would kill me. I was certain he would. Still believe he would. I am 70.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what does this next one say, Father? I remember a long time ago of someone
Whom I did not know, but she was a teenager and did get an abortion. I do remember she was extremely withdrawn and extremely sad.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mhm.
Well, and Kevin, part of this, we'll have you comment on all of this. The third category of grandparents, Janet, are the ones who are opposed to the abortion, want to save the child, and know about the imminent abortion. You didn't know your daughter was going to have an abortion, because then you would have intervened.
I could have intervened
in a strong way.
Right.
Others do know about it, okay, and they try to convince them not to do it. Now, Kevin, what I often think here is the kind of situation Janet is in, and those grandparents who only find out when it's too late. There's an additional layer of pain and grief there, over and above the one who knew it was coming but tried to stop it. And tell me what you think about this, both of you, because on the one hand, the person who knew it was coming and spoke up for the baby and tried to lead the mom to alternatives and so forth, at least that person can say later on, I had the chance to save this baby and I did my best. Whereas someone like in your case and so many others who find out about it only later, the added grief is, I could have had a chance. Maybe I could have saved that child. Maybe I could have saved my daughter from the pain of an abortion. I wasn't even, so not only did you lose your grandchild, you lost even the chance to speak up and save the grandchild. Isn't that an added layer of pain and grief here?
I would say that in both cases, it's just a different level of pain. And I would use the word trauma, particularly in the case where you're not able to stop what you know is going to lead to the death of your grandchild, and you know is going to hurt your son or daughter. That's the textbook psychological definition of emotional traumas, PTSD. So it would not be uncommon for grandparents in those situations to have the same kind of symptoms of nightmares and anxiety, depression, triggers that would set off anxiety and depression, reminders of the child that was lost. So I think in both cases, Father, I mean, I get your point in one sense. There is energy going towards being able to do something, and I think that does help on one level. But then when that energy and that effort leads to you still can't stop it.
Right.
That's rough. As it was in Janet's case, to learn later, it's a different unfolding of that pain, but it's kind of a similar traumatic loss in many ways.
Right. I just want to remind our folks that I wrote this book, Shockwaves, The Wider Circle of Victims, where you can read about all these different victims of abortion and the hurt and the damage in this book. And it's available at our online store at prolifeproducts.org. We'd love to send you a copy of Shockwaves, Abortion's Wider Circle of Victims. Now, there's another category after grandparents. We have, and a lot of people don't think about this, but okay, you had that abortion in high school or college, went on with your life eventually, even if you eventually found healing. Now you marry Mr. Wonderful and you're ready to start a family, right? What effect does that prior abortion have on this child now that you're the sibling? to that baby that you're going to have, right?
Mhm.
And we know there's been a lot of research by the Canadian psychiatrist, Dr. Philip Ney, on what they call sibling survivors. So, Father, maybe you want to just say a few words about sibling survivors.
Well, there are actually various categories of survivors, and the sibling survivors is one of these several categories. The bottom line is, if somebody could have been aborted, might have been aborted, perhaps an abortion was being planned on them, an abortion was done on one of their siblings, they are a survivor. All of them are survivors. And to lose a sibling really makes one face very deep questions about their own well-being, because it's their parents
Right.
on whom they're relying for safety, support, love, nurture, food, shelter, clothing, everything. It's their parents who killed their brother, their sister. So the first immediate question is, am I safe? Am I safe? What does that do? My parents love me? Am I wanted?
Well,
Do I have to work
see,
harder to be wanted?
that's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
You know, am I wanted? Right away, that little kid becomes like an overachiever. Like, I've got to get good grades in school. I have to, like, if I'm trying to learn to ride a bike, I got to get this down pat, and I got to
Right.
everything they have to do the best, because if I don't,
What happens?
what happens to
Yeah,
me?
what's going to happen to me?
You know.
Right. Yeah.
And one case, Kevin and Father, I want to point out is Dr. Philip Ney. You know, he's a child psychiatrist, family practice, who has studied abortion for decades too. One case he told me about in his practice, which I think really draws your attention to how this is really happening. He had a mother come to him with a little girl, 6 years old, and the problem was she was wetting her bed and having night terrors and wetting her bed and wetting her bed. No matter what the mother tried, she couldn't get this little girl to stop this terror in the night and wetting the bed. So Dr. Ney has the little girl in another room with one of his associates, and he's interviewing the mother in another room. And so the associate, kind of like what you do with a little kid, you give her some paper and some crayons, and the not knowing what the kid was going to do, she says to the little girl, "Oh, draw." Now this child was the only child, and says to her, "Draw a picture of your family." So what does she draw? She draws her mommy and her daddy and herself, and then she draws two other older children, like bigger kids in the picture. You know, kids at that age, what are they? These little stick figures, you know, they put the little triangles for dresses and things on the kid. So the associate looks at the picture and thanks the little girl. She goes, "I'll be right back." And she brings the picture over and shows it to Dr. Ney, who's talking to the mother. So Dr. Ney looks at the picture and then looks at the mother and says, he doesn't use the word abortion. He says, "Tell me, have you had any pregnancy losses?" So you always use that word, right? Very safe word, Kevin, right? Instead of abortion, pregnancy loss.
Right.
So she puts her head down and tears start welling up. And with her, she wouldn't even look at Dr. Ney. She got her head down. And she goes, "Yes, I've lost. Yes, I've had 2 abortions. 2 abortions." This little girl, how did she know to draw 2 missing siblings? Amazing, right?
The bottom line is, they often know.
They often have a sense. And that's what this little girl, eventually, Dr. Ney had the little girl and the mother together in counseling, took a few months. But after this whole, it was like the white elephant in the middle of the room. The secret came out, the admission of what happened, and then the counseling of the little girl so she could feel safe and secure again. Because that's what was the underlying cause, Father, was that she had this sense of somebody was missing in her family. She had a sense of, I had a brother or sister, 2 of them. Where are they? And her feeling, am I wanted? Am I wanted? Am I wanted?
There are many things that children pick up on,
Right.
that we don't realize they're picking up on, because we're thinking, adults are thinking adult thoughts. They're paying attention to adult things going on in the room. And these are things often beyond the reach of children anyway. They're paying attention to other things.
Right.
And sometimes they overhear it.
Mm-hmm.
The parent might be talking about the 2 children that were lost. Sometimes the younger child overhears it. Other times it's just, like you said, an innate sense
Mhm.
Okay. There may be very many ways that they find out.
Right.
Survivor syndrome that Dr. Ney has studied and written about, and another book we could recommend, by the way, is called Deeply Damaged by Dr. Philip Ney.
And that's available, by the
and
way,
he
on
was-
Amazon still.
That's right, Deeply Damaged. They experience some of the same effects of survivors coming back from war: anxiety and guilt. Anxiety, they narrowly escaped death, but is death lurking for me right around the corner? Something's going to happen. And guilt. One would think that one feels good about surviving, but actually they feel guilty. Why was I the one
That was chosen.
and not my sibling
Right.
who died? And therefore it can feel like, well, I'm responsible for the death of my sibling, because after all, it was because I didn't die that they did.
Right.
And they have these layers of guilt coming upon them. And it's a real syndrome.
Right. It is, absolutely. And of course, Kevin, these kind of siblings, I mean, if they want to go on a Rachel's Vineyard retreat, when they realize they've lost a sibling to abortion, they would be also welcomed on those retreats too, wouldn't they?
Absolutely. They have attended, less so than the other categories of fathers, grandparents, accomplices in abortion, for instance. But we have had siblings attend, and they've had very beautiful experiences of healing. There's also, you mentioned earlier, Teresa Bonapartis, and she has a wonderful program called Entering Kanan. And that's a program specifically for those siblings who come to know that they've lost a brother or sister to abortion. And they can, so they have a network of support there that has developed as a result of that. So it's something else that we could recommend to anyone who feels they might want to have a deeper healing of that experience.
Right. I think, Father, we just had a question
Yes.
here. It says, this is from
Joven.
Joven. How is the father responsible when he had no recourse to prevent it?
Well, there are different situations.
There are
of
different
responsibility,
situations,
and
right.
there are many who are not responsible at all, because they knew it, they saw it coming, they knew about it,
Right.
and they did everything they could to prevent it.
Right.
They might not have had recourse in the sense of a way to actually stop it,
Mhm.
but in those cases, there's not responsibility.
Yeah, well, with the fathers, there's several layers, and Kevin can comment more about this. First of all, you have the dads who the girlfriend says, I'm pregnant. What should we do? And if he says it's up to you, whatever you want, well, that's already an abortion-minded question, because for her, she's looking for him to say, oh, it's okay. We'll have the baby. We'll get through this together. But if he goes, oh, it's up to you, right, Kevin? That's like inviting her to go have an abortion by not saying we can get through this together. But then there's the dads who say, well, you have to have an abortion, right? Those guys. And they'll say, I'll give you the money. We'll take care of it. Make the appointment. I'll take you next week. They push her right down the abortion train. Here you go. Then the third category of guys is they have no idea their girlfriend was even pregnant. She takes that little home pregnancy test. She says, oh my God, I'm pregnant. She goes off, has the abortion. Sometimes they'll find out years later that they lost a child to abortion. So Kevin, you deal a lot with men and abortion. For our question, gentlemen, I'm just showing him that there's like 3 levels of different men, circumstances that could bring on the abortion. So Kevin, why don't you comment a little bit?
Yeah, I would highly recommend my book, Tears of the Fisherman, because I have a chapter in there on men who experience abortion. I asked the question first, can men experience abortion as trauma? I give the definition of psychological trauma, and then I present the story of Jason. And in that story, Jason is powerless to stop the death of his child. And as that story unfolds, you can read about it in detail. But he ends up experiencing hospitalization, psychiatric hospitalization, and all kinds of other issues. He eventually is able to find healing. But it certainly can be a very difficult and traumatic loss. And And certainly the issue in that case is not his responsibility in the abortion. It's more his need really for emergency emotional help, mental health help, spiritual help. Um,
Right.
I
Yeah.
will. I will add, though, this is coming from other men. Now, I'm not saying this in any kind of judgment, but men who, even in those cases where men eventually find healing, sometimes part of their spiritual healing and part of their spiritual growth is they recognize that, you know what, when that conception took place, that woman and that child did not have the commitment that was necessary for her to feel secure enough to say yes to that pregnancy. So it's not taking full responsibility because the woman has to take her responsibility in that. But men also take responsibility how they're using their sexuality, and are they putting women at risk by not offering the commitment, the marital covenant that's necessary for children to arrive safely in this world.
Right.
Now, Janet and Kevin, another thing, and for those that are just joining us, by the way, you're watching our seminar for Abortion Recovery Awareness Month, and we are exploring the wounds of abortion and the healing that's available. And today we're talking about the wider circle of victims, people beyond the baby, of course, is killed. There's the mom, there's the dad, there's the grandparents, there's the siblings, there's the other relatives, there's the friends, there's the abortionists, there's the pro-life advocates. Everyone is wounded by every abortion that occurs. But let's talk about the fact that, you have a mom who has an abortion, then she has other children, or either before or after the abortion. So they are now sibling survivors. The question often comes up, should she tell her surviving children about the abortion? And in a nutshell, we advise the answer to be yes, carefully. And carefully has to do with the timing and the manner of it. But the reason that it's ultimately yes is that, and we all experience this in different contexts too, people can go through a significant portion of their lives when they realize something is off balance and they don't know what's putting it off balance. Why does this person always react that way when they hear about this topic or when they're in this situation? Or why don't they pay attention to me when, on this aspect of my life? Or, something about the behavior of people in our lives that we don't know why they behave that way, but we sure know that they do. And then it's like, it's like in astronomy, when astronomers notice a planet, going in a certain orbit, they can tell when there's an influence of another planet, pulling it a little bit off course or affecting it in some way. So this is true in human relationships. The bottom line is that when a person has an abortion, there are aspects of their parenting to other children that are affected. And they're affected negatively. Might be, like you were saying before, overprotection, or it might be an inability to bond.
And some of the moms, Father, they become helicopter moms.
Helicopter moms,
where they hover over their child.
Right, because that's an expression of the guilt. I took the life of my other child. Maybe this Father, one will be
when you
killed.
think about it, and Kevin, you could comment on this too. I think about when I raised my children. All right, they're in their 40s now. There was none of these. Did you ever see these little wrist things they put on the kid with a rope that the mother has?
Yes.
It's like they have the kid on a leash, right? I mean, leash. I had 3 little ones. Okay, my daughter was only 23 months old when the twins were born. Okay, so I would have a stroller in her, or I had 3 little ducklings. I grabbed them all, okay, hold mommy's hands. I didn't have leashes for them, but if you noticed, since abortion, we have all these protective devices. You notice that?
Over protective devices.
We got to have the kid on a leash. I always tell Father Frank when I see them in amusement parks, I want to get a scissor and snip them. Snip the leashes.
Yeah.
But the other aspect that we can get into too is, do you notice, and I think abortion plays a factor. We now see people with dogs in baby carriages. Have you noticed that? Have you noticed that?
Yeah.
Dogs in baby carriages. They even have little car seats for dogs now, for the car. All right. As if these are their children.
Yeah.
You go out to California. When I go visit my daughter out there, there's a sign. I love this. A Nordstrom's by the escalator. It shows a picture of a person with a dog and a leash. And it says, please be careful with your pets on the escalator. The dogs are all over the place. They're in supermarkets. They're in the malls. They're in stores. They're like they
No.
reign like
Well,
kids. But don't you think abortion is
yes,
underpinning here?
yes, no, no, and the point is, abortion is underpinning a lot of unusual, erratic,
Behavior.
or strange behavior, and this goes back to the basic point I'm making is that yes, when you come to the point where you can tell the other people in the family, especially the other children, that there was an abortion,
Mm-hmm.
there's going to be a wide range of different reactions, but ultimately they will appreciate it because now their life and especially their relationship with you will make more sense.
Makes sense.
That's the point I want
Right.
to get at. It will make a lot of questions that maybe they never asked, but that were eating away at their mind and their heart will now fall into place.
Right.
Now
Well,
it makes sense.
As far as
It's painful, but it makes sense.
well, as far as telling your children too, with the women and men of silent no more, that's a requirement before we let them go public
Well,
with their
sure,
testimony.
because you don't want the children to find out on YouTube.
Right, or Facebook
Right.
that their mom had an abortion. And I think, like you're saying, Father, it's age appropriate, meaning you know your child, and when they're old enough to receive the information. In fact, Dr. Nay wrote a little booklet called "Telling Your Children."
That's right.
About an
Which
abortion.
we'd be happy to send people if
they want that.
Yeah.
Or you can just Google it on his website, which is, by the way, messengers2.com. It's all up there. On
Well,
the internet.
contact us because we want to know that you want to get it.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Contact
All right.
us.
Well, I still have a few copies, I'm sure, in the back in our resource department. But, telling your children is so important. And again, any man or woman who speaks for Silent No More, they have told their children. That's a requirement. And not just telling the children, but, we always point out to them, well, wait, if you're going to come out and hold a sign, I regret my abortion, or I regret loss, Father, and give your testimony publicly, like you said, Father, anyone can film you. It could be on YouTube or Facebook. But it's not just telling your children. Do your parents know?
Right.
If you have other brothers and sisters that would be aunts and uncles of this baby, do they know? I mean, you really, we don't want to take advantage of any person just to push them out to tell a testimony.
Well, before you tell the world, you tell the people in your world.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's so important, isn't it, Kevin?
Yeah, I want to just remind our viewers as well that on the Silent No More Awareness Campaign website, there's a great overview of the issues involved in speaking to your children. A real nice presentation. I know my wife, Dr. Teresa Burke, has a nice little section in there as well. So I highly recommend that if you're wanting to kind of dive in a little deeper about these issues. Right, Janet?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And Kevin and Janet, we're coming, actually, this hour is going so fast. We have about 10 more minutes. The wider circle of victims also includes the, first of all, other relatives. And it ties in what we were just saying. People are going to notice differences in behavior.
Right.
And they're either going to know about the abortion or they're not, or they opposed it or they participated in it. So there's all of that. But then, and we talked about the friends, but then the abortionists. And I just want to point out, and Dr. Nay's book, Deeply Damaged, goes into this at great length, and also his book, The Centurion's Pathway. He calls these ex-abortionists centurions, and we've been all trained very much in his method for healing these people. The abortionists are deeply damaged. What they do hurts them. And I mean, they're doing a tremendous evil. We're not justifying it in the least, and we're not trying to create some kind of, empty sympathy for these people. But the point is, what they're doing is dehumanizing them.
Right.
You can't dehumanize the baby without dehumanizing yourself. And they are conflicted and they are often resentful of the work that they do. It's like they feel like they're doing society's dirty work. And they are living in a sea of despair, substance abuse, broken relationships, alcoholism. I mean, these people are bad news in more ways than one. And we want people to understand that there is a damage there. There's a deep wound. And there's also a healing program for these abortionists, not just the doctors, the nurses, the medical assistants, the receptionists, anybody who works in an abortion facility, even for 1 hour. And sometimes people go in there, they realize what they've stepped into, and they go running that same day. But even for 1 hour you work in an abortion facility, you are damaged for life.
Well, every appointment, phone call you take, and you schedule that appointment, you've just
Eh.
scheduled the death sentence for the baby. So
That's right.
you're an accomplice in the death of that baby because you put in that woman's name on the time.
Yep.
Oh, come in Saturday at 8:30 a.m. Well, there's the death
Yes.
sentence for that baby.
Exactly.
You know, it's and of course we know abortionists who have come out of the abortion industry, who have been forgiven through these healing programs. And one of the cases I always like to talk about is our friend Dr. He's one of our medical advisors now. He's 100% pro-life, Dr. Tony Levatino.
Mhm.
And here, Dr. Levatino, when you think about all this, Dr. Levatino was an OBGYN. So let's say this morning he'd be in the delivery room delivering a baby. And then the next morning he'd be next door in a different OR killing a baby.
Mhm.
And this was going on for quite a number of years. But it wasn't until he had the death of his own child.
His own child, who was adopted.
Who was adopted.
Because they couldn't have children.
They him and his wife were unable to have children. Now adopted this little girl. I think she was about 6 or 7 when she was killed by a car
in front of their house.
In front of their home. He rode in the ambulance with his child, died at the hospital. And then he said that next Monday, when he went back into that same OR number, such and such room to abort another child, he started the procedure and he froze. Like, I can't do this anymore. But he said, well, once you start an abortion, you got to finish it.
Yeah.
He had to finish that abortion, but then he dropped his instruments and he went to one of his partners and said, I can't do this anymore.
Well, you see,
know?
I mean, these people are again, they're deeply wounded. And I would always remember Dr. David Brewer saying how the first time he saw an abortion was like a hot poker in his heart. And that's the first time he did one, another hot poker. But see, that's a fork in the road. Either you're going to let the pain keep you from going further down that road and you stop.
Or you're going
to start making excuses why it's okay to do it.
Right.
You're going to lie upon lie upon lie, layer upon layer of rationalization, and you feel it less each time. That's the dehumanizing. You feel it less each time, and now you are on a path of just being a destroyer, both of these babies and their families and yourself.
That's right. That's right. Well, we have to pray for all these abortion doctors that are still performing abortions, that they will come to healing, like so many of the abortion doctors that we know who have dropped their instruments and come to the Lord and receive forgiveness. I mean, one time, Father, weren't you, you conducted one of these Centurion retreats, and among, I think you said there were 6 or 7 participants in abortion, and how many babies were they responsible for killing?
Yes, well, one of the processes of healing after you've been an abortionist or a clinic worker is to estimate the number of lives you took. I remember one woman I helped set out on this process. A year later, she came to me. Her face was glowing. She says, I did it. I honor it because I told you, you remember each one, you honor
one
each
a day.
one per day. She did it in the course of the year. But when I first asked her, how many did you kill or participate in killing? She knew the number right away. Immediately.
She really did.
269, she said. Immediately.
Wow.
So and some of them, they have to go through more of a calculation of how many. But in that room, that what you were remembering was the retreat we did. And among the participants in that small room, 500,000 lives had been taken.
Among 6.
That group.
6 women participated in abortion clinics, were responsible for the death of 500,000 babies. Father, there's another comment here. You want to read that question?
Is there a way to raise our kids so that they will tell us when they get pregnant instead of getting abortion without telling us or letting them know they are pregnant? Well, Brian talks about this very beautifully, right?
Right.
Saying that they have to, the challenge is it's an atmosphere of trust,
right,
and love, unconditional moral guidance together with unconditional acceptance that you will catch them if they fall.
Well, and Brian Kemper, who's heads up our youth ministry, 2 of his daughters actually became pregnant as teenagers out of wedlock. And he said that his first response when they told him, Daddy, I'm pregnant, was he hugged them and said, I love you.
I love you. Yes.
I love you. I mean, that was the first response. And what I always say, to everybody is, yes, that unexpected pregnancy, is a little unexpected, but it's an unexpected blessing. And I think that's the language. We have to use a very affirming, life-affirming language that, it's unexpected blessing would be my advice too.
I'd like to add to that before, if possible, before incidences occur, before challenging situations, when your kids are old enough to have this discussion, you can talk to them and say, look, you may have something happen where you feel like if you share this with me, I'm going to be angry or I'm going to be disappointed. And I want to just reassure you that anything that you run into, any difficulty you have, a challenging situation, we're going to work through this together. I'm going to be there to help you and love you through it. The only thing that will disappoint me is if you don't trust me enough to share with me when you're going through a hard time. Even then, I'm going to be there for you. Even if you fail to tell me and something bad happens, I'm going to still be there for you. But if we can solve that together, just know that I won't be disappointed.
That's
Something
right.
like that.
Beautiful. Great way. A great
That's
way.
great,
of
Kevin.
putting it,
Thank
yeah.
you. Well, Father, in the remaining time, I just want to first of all remind our viewers that at our online store at prolifeproducts.org, we have Dr. Teresa Burke's book, Forbidden Grief. We have Kevin's book, Tears of a Fisherman. We have the book, Father, that you, Kevin, and Teresa wrote, which is Rivers of Blood, Oceans of Mercy.
Yes.
And of course, my book, The
Shockwaves.
Shockwaves, and my first book, Recall Abortion. But in the few moments left, I don't mind if either of you, because we were talking about teenagers, for me to tell you about my brand new book that actually came out this week called Everything You Need to Know About Abortion for Teens. And what's great about this book, brothers and sisters, is right here in the middle, we have what's called photos of the unborn child. It says, meet the unborn child. And it's like a baby book, only it's a baby book of the unborn child starting at 7 weeks and going through the pregnancy. And in this book, I really talk to the teenagers about what they need to know. See, it's not everything you want to know about abortion, because who wants to know about abortion? If you ask that question, they're going to say very few people. But this is, no, you need to know about abortion. And if you're interested in getting an autographed copy of this book, just go to abortionandteens.com. Again, abortionandteens.com. I will personally autograph it to your teenager. And brothers and sisters, don't let your young people go off to high school or college without reading the book. This is a great summer read before they return to school.
Right? One of the ways to think about it, I always say to parents, you give your children, your teens, information on abortion before the people who are selling it do.
Yes.
That's the thing. If someone's old enough to have an abortion, they're old enough to have a conversation about it, and they're old enough to read this book.
Well, and that's what happens, Father and Kevin, is that, the Planned Parenthood, they're embedded in the sex education in the high schools. They're on college campuses. They're there selling abortion, like you just said, Father, to your young people.
Oh, they're selling it aggressively.
And so I was asked by my publisher, believe it or not, after they published Recall Abortion, he said to me over at 10 Books, they said, you know what? No one's talking to the people who are having these abortions, the young people. Mm-hmm. Janet, could you just take what you learned so far, your decades of experience? Can you write a book, talk to the teenagers? And in this book, I also give them plenty of information about sexually transmitted diseases. I talk to them about chastity. There's a whole chapter on chastity. And finally, at the back of the book, I give them a little appendix into meeting the pro-life movement and the group so that they can get involved in a positive way. So again, I'm so excited about everything you need to know about abortion for teens. Go to abortionandteens.com. I'd love to send you a copy out today. Well, Kevin, thank you for joining us on the program today. And let's hope everyone, again, you're all part of the healing process. Go to abortionforgiveness.com. Spread the word. Because as always, brothers and sisters, there are some abortions only you can stop, some lives only you can save, and some people only you can bring to healing. Thank you for joining us, and God bless.
smile without your love. I see you in the face of every child. This is my body, but you are always in my heart, always in my mind. If I could choose again, there'd be no choice for me but you. I'd do what I must do. I'd even give my life for you. This is my body. You cannot tell me what to do. It's not up to you. I will decide. This is my body, and I alone will choose. If this life within me lives or dies, this is my body. I'll do what I must do. This is my life. I will not sacrifice my life for you.
This is my body given up for you, that you might live eternally. This is my body, yet thy will be done, not mine. Broken as the bread, crushed as the wine. This is my body. I do what I must do. I give my life a sacrifice of love for you. This is my body given up for you.
I have the right to choose. I have so much to lose. Don't tell me what to do.
This is my body, that thy will be done, not mine.
If I could choose again, there'd be no choice for me but you. I don't know you. I'll never hold you. You're always there, awake or in my dream.
I give my life.
This is my life. I cannot sacrifice my life. I would do anything for you. I can see no other way. The choice is me or you.
Father, forgive them. They know not what they do.
How can I forgive myself for what I've done to you?
My wounds have set you free. Do this in remembrance of me. This is my body given up for you, that you might live eternally. This is my body, yet thy will be done, not mine.
give my life a sacrifice.
A sacrifice of